Good morning, PTNI's Daily Show. Happy Tuesday. Sorry about the delayed start here. Had a patient jump on my schedule this morning at 8. Coming back from California. My name is Alan. I'll be your host today for the PTNI's Daily Show. Today we're talking about all things clinical on Clinical Tuesdays. Great weekend this past weekend with Mitch out in California at Hayashida Associates and Variant Training Lab. So super glad to be out there. Great facility, great host. Thanks to all those folks out there who hosted us. All the folks who came to the course had a great weekend teaching folks how to get moving under a barbell better, how to get folks loaded better. Fantastic weekend. Took a little vacay on either end of the weekend, getting out there on Thursday to have Friday and part of yesterday out there in Santa Barbara. Ride down the PCH down to Los Angeles and see the ocean was a good time with some friends. So what are we talking about today? We are going to talk about return to sport criteria for ACL tears. So what's the deal with return to sport criteria? What's best? What does the research say about ACL tears and what's going on with using return to sport criteria? What should we use? And how can we best help these patients get back to sport after an ACL repair? So there are a lot of ACL tears in the country. There's 350,000 ACL repairs a year in the United States. There's actually 1 million ACL tears with repairs on the planet a year. So that's a ton of ACL tears, right? So what's happening there? We spend a ton of cash on this. We spend $1 billion a year repairing ACLs. And unfortunately, and sorry to be a Debbie Downer so early in your morning, unfortunately we spend all that cash, all that rehab, all that surgery, and like most things in our healthcare system, we have very little to show for it, right? The outcomes are not good. At 2 years post-op, we know that right in 2007 told us that the likelihood you'll re-tear that same ACL that's been repaired is about the same as tearing your other leg, right? So you have about the same chance to re-tear as you do to tear the non-injured leg, the non-surgically repaired leg, right? So that's not a really good outcome. That tells us folks aren't as strong as they could be getting back to function. We know that, speaking of getting back to function, only about half actually go back to sport, right? Whether, they say, hey, I had my ACL teared and it's repaired and I'm done, I'm calling it quits, I'm not going to hurt my body anymore for this, or whether they can't go back, right? Can't get that motion back, can't get that strength back, something happens with the surgery, and they just feel like they can't get back to sport. We know that only about half of folks actually get back to normal activity and normal sport after an ACL tear with repair. We know about a lot of folks, the majority of the folks who do have a surgically repaired ACL develop true knee osteoarthritis at about 20 years post-op. 80% go on to have that true knee OA. So not good outcomes when you tear your ACL and have a repair. Barbara West of Illinois back in 2011 did a really great systematic review, looked at a lot of studies, looked at 264 studies of ACL repairs, trying to find some sort of standardized or best practice return to sport criteria. And after reviewing all those papers, found that only about half, 105 of those studies, provided any sort of return to sport criteria. 84 of those studies only looked at healing time, so time since surgery as a return to sport criteria. 40 studies looked at surgical time and kind of natural healing time and some subjective data. And then only a really small portion, about 13% or 35 of that pool of studies, provided any sort of objective return to sport criteria. So when we're talking return to sport criteria, there's not a lot out there of best practice of what we need to be doing. So of those 35 studies that did have objective criteria for return to sport, only about 10% looked at limb symmetry index or kind of overall strength as return to sport criteria. 6% looked at swelling, so edema and effusion and range of motion. 4% looked at just single leg hop. And then one lone study had a custom stabilization and strength program, and then one study used just questionnaires only. So kind of a mix of things, limb symmetry index, stabilization, single leg, looking at range of motion, what is best there. When looking at those folks who do go through return to sport criteria, We know that only about 23% of them actually pass before being released, regardless of whatever criteria is being used. And then we know that those folks, 60% are likely to re-tear the same ACL, and they are actually 235% more likely to re-tear the contralateral ACL. So sorry, not re-tear, tear the contralateral. So 60% more likely to re-tear the surgically repaired one, and 235% more likely to tear the contralateral ACL. So that was from Webster and Hewitt. That just got released in 2019. So it seems like something is going on here, right? We're not getting the outcomes we want. What is happening here? A lot of the data, a lot of the research shows us that these folks just don't seem to be loaded rigorously enough. They don't seem to have any sort of testing or criteria going on to return these folks to sport. So what's happening here? So that tells us that we're really bad at helping these folks in rehab, and we're also really bad at researching it, right? That research data is kind of all over the place. Great quote here from Davies in 2017 said that returning an athlete to sport after an ACL tear is one of the most challenging medical decisions ever to be made by a sports medicine team. So it should be a team-based approach, right? So it should involve the surgeon, it should involve you as the PT, and it should involve somebody that you are working with, ideally on the back end after traditional PT, right? Whether that's the athletic trainer or strength and conditioning coach. We know that these folks are not getting strong enough in PT and getting back to sport, and they're not getting to the strength that they need to prevent a re-tear or a tear on the other leg. So often limb symmetry index of trying to get these folks to 90% of the contralateral leg, the non-injured leg, is kind of the gold standard. But we have to remember that these folks tore their ACL because what they were trying to do, the demands on that leg were exceeding their capacity. So just settling for 90% isn't good enough, right? It has to be 100%. It has to be 110%. We have to get these folks as strong as we possibly can. We need to know that the research shows us that these folks are just not getting the strength, getting the stabilization training, getting the sport training they need to actually go back to the sport that they're doing. We know that a lot of surgeons are no longer following those long protocols that they used to. They used to have 6, 9, 12-month protocols, and that's not happening anymore, right? In the clinic, I'm seeing folks who come in with a 3-month protocol, and that might not be long enough, right? These folks come in with a lot of atrophy, a lot of weakness, a lot of instability that needs a lot of time, a lot of diligent loading to overcome. So we shouldn't be just shooting for 90% limb symmetry and saying that person is strong enough, because we know they're not strong enough. The data and the research is overwhelming that these folks go on to just re-tear it again, tear the other leg, both. I mean, there's some folks, unfortunately, in these studies who not only re-tore the same, but tore the other one, and now they're in a really rough spot. So we need to argue for more time when we're working with those surgeons in the clinic and getting that referral, and just knowing this research like the back of our hand, that these folks need more time in PT, we need more time to load them, and then we need to be sure that as the PTs, we are actually loading them, getting them as strong as they possibly can before we tell them that they're good to go back to sport. We know we need to be combining a lot of these different test batteries that are out there. We can't just rely on surgical healing time or range of motion or manual muscle test. We need to be doing a lot of functional stuff, hopping, cutting. We need to actually get these folks back out on the field or the court or wherever they're coming from and watch them under a low intensity situation and see how they're performing. Oftentimes you'll take these folks and have them run, and you'll just see they can't, they have trouble not only initiating acceleration, but controlling the deceleration when they get into a run. It's very obvious that something is still going on with that surgical leg that needs to be corrected, sometimes with just some running drills and running mechanics and cutting and bounding and that sort of stuff, all the stuff that they would do in sport. We know that if they're going back to the sports team, we need to get connected with a strength and conditioning program. A lot of you know, like I do, it's really unfortunate, especially high school athletes and middle school athletes, there is no strength and conditioning program, right? Basketball means showing up and playing basketball 3 hours a day. That's how you prep for basketball, right? So we need to connect with these coaches too and say, hey, you've got to do something strength and conditioning. We've got to load these kids a couple times a week. We know that the weakness, the demands we're trying to place on those ligaments is why they're getting blown. They're not strong enough to begin with, and just training basketball or soccer a couple hours a day and then playing a game on Friday night is not enough to make sure these folks are ready for their actual demands of sports. They have to be strong, really, really, really strong. When they're leaving rehab, they need to be stronger than they ever have in their life, right? 90% is not going to cut it. We need to load these folks up with squats and deadlifts. A good marker is you should be able to squat and deadlift your own body weight, right? That's a good sign that you have some baseline of strength. Often these folks are doing just unweighted sit-to-stands or single leg sit-to-stands from a box, and that's just not going to cut it. It might challenge them initially in the clinic, but when they get back out there on the field, that's a lot of force going through that leg when they are jumping and cutting and landing that they're not going to have the capacity to, and then we can start to see why these folks continue to have trouble with re-tearing. So reach out to those coaches. If they don't have a strength and conditioning program, maybe you've just found your new side hustle, right? Or maybe your new full-time gig is working with the strength and conditioning program, developing one for those teams in the area. If they do have one, reach out to those strength and conditioning coaches and see what they're doing. Maybe you can help there, get those kids loaded a bit better, and at the very least just reach out and let them know that you have an athlete that you're going to be returning to sports soon that needs to continue to progress in strength and conditioning and do the right stuff so that they don't go on to tear again or tear the other side. So make sure we're reaching those connections. We're being out there in the community as well as in the clinic. Make sure that they're squatting, deadlifting, push pressing, really putting a lot of load through their legs. Make sure that we're seeing them out on the field. How do they look running? How do they look cutting? How do they look turning on that knee? All that stuff plays a factor along with surgical repair time and subjective data. So again, like we say here a lot, end.org, combine all that stuff together. We need to address all that stuff. Make sure that person leaves the clinic stronger than they came in and ready to go back to sport. Make sure initially when they first come in that they're getting as much aerobic capacity stuff as they can, right? Get them on the assault bike, get them on the rower, get them on whatever you have. Newer surgeons now are often giving these folks heavy isometric wall sits right after surgery, right? So we see these athletes that are doing long wall sits to get that muscle loaded isometrically right after surgery, and then they're coming to PT and laying on their back and doing leg lifts and shorter quads and stuff. So they're already being given higher level stuff from their surgeon, and then they're coming to PT and actually doing regressive exercises. So make sure you're pushing these folks with heavy isometrics as long as they're pain-free, and starting to work in eccentrics and getting them loaded as soon as possible after surgery, and then being really, really diligent for a couple weeks, a couple months even, about getting these folks super, super strong, stronger than they've ever been, before you start to look at all those other functional tests and before you are confident that they can go back to sport. So what should we be using? Full pain-free range of motion into flexion and extension is always good, and be really, really diligent that they can hit those in ranges and that it's pain-free. Oftentimes we'll see that folks still have pain a long time after surgery into actual in-range flexion and extension. We have to make sure they can access that full range of motion. We have to make sure we're doing stuff, obviously everybody knows like Lachman's test, but make sure we're doing the pivot shift test too. Hold that knee in extension and give a lot of valgus at the fibula, trying to sublux that tibia as you move into extension and flexion, and just make sure there's no clunk or pain or any sort of posterior motion, that ligament is fully intact and able to accept load. That's a great way to know that the ligament is healing well. Look at stuff like double leg jump, focus on that eccentric deceleration. Folks that are jumping a lot in their sport, so think about basketball players and wide receivers and stuff, they should be able to be jumping 90 to 100% of their body height, land with an eccentric deceleration with a good landing response. Obviously single leg, hop, test battery, all that stuff that we know really well is important as well. Looking at something called the lower extremity functional test battery, which is a series of agility drills. So there's 8 agility drills, stuff that we already know, but that we just often don't test in a battery like the lower extremity functional test. So it's forward run, backward run, side shuffle, karaoke, not karaoke, figure 8 runs, 45-degree cuts, and then 90-degree cuts. So progressing those folks back to the demands of their sport. And then again, that sport-specific testing, get them out throwing, catching, running, cutting, kicking a ball, dunking a basketball, whatever their sport is, and watch them do it, right? Like actually watch them do it in a practice setting where the intensity is lower, and just see how they look, see how they feel, see how they handle it before you make that decision that that person is indeed ready to go back to sport. And just remember that that's probably going to be a 3 to 6 month process, not a 4 or 8 week process, right? We can't just assume full range of motion and manual muscle tests of 5 out of 5 is good to go. We have to get those folks super strong. So I'll post some of those articles that I cited. I cited a lot of research on the front end today. I'll post those on the Facebook page for those who want to see, for those who are watching on Instagram, or those who are listening on the podcast for you guys to check out. Don't forget about virtual ice. Going to be an awesome session tonight with Mitch. Mitch is going to do a really detailed case study about a patient he had with back pain, getting him back to CrossFit, a higher level CrossFit athlete, getting him back to CrossFit over the series of a couple months. He's going to share exactly what he did and his thought process behind that. So that's going to be a super awesome episode tonight. So don't forget to sign up for Vice if you haven't signed up for Vice yet. Hump Day Hustling, ptnice.com, scroll to the bottom, sign up, email in your inbox every Wednesday morning. Top 5 research articles and posts we think you should see that we've seen over the past week, curated by the ICE faculty. And then your next chance to catch us in the fitness athlete division out on the road is May 4th and 5th. Mitch will be in Victoria, British Columbia with Sarah, and Zach will be down in Portland, Oregon. And then Fitness Athlete Essential Foundation starts again June 6th, and Advanced Concepts starts May 6th. And if you are looking for more fitness athlete stuff, we have a new course in development. If you have already been to an ICE course and you're on our ICE students page, you've got an exclusive access to learn about the course and sign up for it early, but we'll be launching that course very soon. We're super excited about it. We think you guys will love it. So that's all I've got for you. Have a great Tuesday. I'll catch you guys next time. Bye, everybody.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.